Did Atlantis really exist? Oceanographers note there is simply no concrete evidence, no ruins or artifacts, that match an advanced Atlantean empire. Still, the mystery of Atlantis has led investigators to propose countless locations across the globe. Plato's Atlantis was never meant just as history. It has always been a story with meaning. Today's archaeologists and ocean scientists are skeptical that Atlantis ever existed. In a 2023 piece, archaeologist David Anderson noted that he's asked about Atlantis so often that he fields daily questions, and the answer is always the same. Atlantis is a fiction, not a researchable location. National Geographic explorers like Anderson and Flint Dibble emphasize that no archaeological evidence supports Plato's tale. Dibble notes that if Athens and Atlantis were truly as Plato described, there would be plenty of Greek art or ruins attesting to such an encounter, yet none exist. The mainstream consensus is unequivocal. Plato's Atlantis was a parable, not a historical account. Nevertheless, adventurous researchers have tried to find traces of Atlantis. In 1931, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution WHOI famously dispatched oceanographers Henry Bigelow and Columbus Iselin aboard the ship Atlantis, scouring the Azores Plateau in the North Atlantic for a sunken continent. They even planned to bore into the seafloor for buried artifacts, hoping to sample top dressing of sediment from the fabled city. After a 42-day cruise, though, they returned empty-handed. The seafloor was simply deep ocean, not ancient city. In 1966, WHOI engineer James Maver took another plunge. Diving off Santorini, Thera, he discovered underwater ruins of a Bronze Age town destroyed by earthquake, a real civilization matching Plato's broad time frame. The site appeared to be a Minoan port, leveled in a disaster reminiscent of Atlantis. However, academic disputes over Maver's exact finds and how to interpret them left no consensus that he had found Atlantis, rather than some known Minoan outpost. More recently, fringe documentaries have sought Atlantis closer to home. In 2011, a National Geographic expedition led by Richard Freund claimed to find Atlantis in the marshlands of southern Spain, the Roman Lacus Ligustinus region, suggesting a forgotten land flooded by ancient tsunamis. Spanish scientists, however, rejected Freund's claims as sensationalistic. It's notable that Spain's Tartessos, a first millennium BC Phoenician trade hub, is well documented in that area, separate from Plato's much older Atlantis. Likewise, satellite imagery theorists have pointed to salt flats near Cadiz, Marismas de Hinojos as possible Atlantis remnants, but these ideas remain speculative. Each time a new discovery is announced, experts quickly point to more mundane explanations. As WHOI historians observe, archaeological treasure hunts have turned up only modern debris or natural formations, with no true Atlantis materializing. Today, the scientific view is clear. The search for Atlantis belongs in the realm of popular fantasy, not funded scholarship. Despite academic skepticism, Atlantis thrives in alternative lore. Occult and pseudoscientific writers have spun ever wilder tales. The 19th century theosophist movement, Madame Blavatsky et al., identified Atlantis with Lemuria and Mu, other supposed lost continents, claiming their sunken civilizations gave rise to all humanity. Writer Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis birth story was embraced by early 20th century Nazis and white supremacists as evidence of a master race lost to history. More recently, fringe authors and TV hosts, from Graham Hancock to Ancient Aliens proponents, have portrayed Atlantis as an ultra-advanced civilization, sometimes with extraterrestrial origins or super technology. These ideas typically lack any scientific backing. Geologists point out that continents don't simply disappear overnight. As Scientific American and others note, Mu and Lemuria were discredited once plate tectonics was understood. Critics also warn that such fantasies can be dangerous, as Donnelly's racialized Atlantis myth had already fed Nazi ideology in the early 20th century. Even fringe archaeologists concede that most alternative Atlantean theories ignore basic facts. No ancient plankton make a sunken continent, and no artifacts corroborate the legends. Nevertheless, these speculations endure in New Age and conspiracy circles, keeping Atlantis always on the map of exotic mysteries. Books and websites confidently declare finding the lost city, and small expeditions search undersea sites or sonar anomalies. Such stories often cherry-pick a natural ruin, say the Nazca Lines or an underwater rock formation, and dub it Atlantean. The scientific community generally regards this as pseudoscience. As one archaeologist wryly observes, people get drawn into a fun fantasy world of riddles, but it's not actual archaeology. Even if Atlantis never existed, Plato's story was intended to teach. Atlantis warns of hubris and moral decay. The Atlanteans in Plato's tale were prosperous, yet grew proud and greedy, so the gods destroyed their continent. This cautionary theme, hunger for power, punished by nature's fury, resonates through Western thought. Plato's dialogues use Atlantis to illustrate the corruption of societies. The very phrase morally bankrupt is used in one summary. Thus, Atlantis became a metaphor for any civilization undone by greed and divine justice. Some modern commentators also see environmental warnings. The sudden end of Atlantis, whether by flood or earthquake, reminds us of natural disasters. Today, scholars like Anderson note that focusing only on dramatic floods can distract from other threats. Plato's story can teach us that societies may ignore gradual problems like famine or climate change until catastrophe strikes. The one terrible night of Atlantis's end still echoes worries of rising seas or ecological collapse. In this way, the myth remains a source of reflection. As Dibble puts it, instead of obsessing over finding Atlantis, we should heed Plato's exploration of unchecked power and the consequences of losing one's moral compass. Ultimately, the enduring lesson is philosophical. In Plato's telling, Atlantis isn't just a cautionary tale of a lost empire. It highlights humanity's ongoing struggle between wisdom and folly. As a National Geographic analysis concludes, the story of Atlantis is a parable on power that continues to spark our imagination precisely because it taps universal themes of virtue, pride, and downfall. A way people view Atlantis has swung wildly through history. In Plato's own era, it may have been received with some credulity, but by Aristotle's time, even his student considered it fanciful. Through the Middle Ages and early modern period, the story was largely forgotten or dismissed as mere allegory. Then, during the Age of Exploration in the 16th to 17th centuries, Atlantis resurged in the popular imagination as Europeans encountered new lands they could not explain by classical history. Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, 1626/27, reinvented Atlantis as a utopian scientific island, reflecting hope in human progress. In 19th century Europe and America, Atlantis achieved a fever pitch. Donnelly's Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, 1882, inspired dozens of books claiming to locate the lost continent in Alaska, Iceland, the Azores, or elsewhere. Theosophists like Madame Blavatsky recast Atlantis as a mystical root race, linking it to all mythologies. This era also saw fantastical maps and fake artifacts. By the mid-20th century, academic archaeology largely put Atlantis to rest. Scientists treated it as a cautionary tale, not history. In recent decades, Atlantis has enjoyed another wave of interest in popular media. TV documentaries, e.g. Expedition Unknown, and magazine articles periodically hype new discoveries, despite skepticism. In fact, surveys of ancient mythology now study Atlantis as a cultural meme rather than a lost society. History channels and websites regularly note that Atlantis has become a legend that refuses to die. Even today, thousands of books and videos on Atlantis continue to be published each year, ensuring that public fascination endures, even as academic consensus remains firmly skeptical. Why does the story of Atlantis continue to captivate? Perhaps because it has everything humans love in a mystery. The allure of a lost world rich beyond imagination, a cautionary fall from grace, and the tantalizing possibility of rediscovery. Plato's Atlantis is not merely a random fable, it's a great myth filled with vivid imagery, glittering palaces, colossal armies, and supernatural gods. As classics professor James Romm says, it contains a lot of elements that people love to fantasize about. Even across 2 millennia, the story's themes of utopia and apocalypse resonate, like the search for El Dorado or the quest for the Holy Grail. Searching for Atlantis appeals to our sense of adventure and hope. Modern writers and filmmakers play on this. A quick glance reveals Atlantis invoked in science fiction, fantasy, and conspiracy thrillers alike. It embodies the ultimate what if. What if there really was a civilization more advanced than our own, now hidden by time? This keeps viewers glued to History TV, drives discussions on internet forums, and inspires new documentaries. The National Geographic archaeologist quoted earlier echoes this. It's far more common for people to ask me about pseudo-archaeology like Atlantis than regular archaeology, because the myth never loses its grip. Ultimately, Atlantis endures because it poses timeless questions. What did humanity lose, and what might we learn if we found it? It asks us to confront the tension between scientific evidence and human imagination. As scholars counsel, instead of chasing phantom ruins, perhaps the real treasure is the insight the legend gives into our fears and aspirations. But for many, that glimmering city in front of the pillars remains an irresistible mystery. Its streets, filled with gold, and knowledge long swallowed by the sea.